Thank you for joining us today. We will be getting started in just a minute. We're waiting for everyone to just come into the meeting from the waiting room. And you should have just gotten a notice that the meeting is being recorded. If you're not comfortable with being recorded, you can turn off your video and you can also mute yourself. And you are all muted. We're going to keep everyone muted during the conversation so that we are able to manage and everyone gets a chance to speak. But there will be time for discussion at the end of the call. So you will be able to unmute yourself when we're ready for that. So just one more minute and we'll be ready to go. And I also wanted to note we are streaming live on Facebook and we will have the materials available to view on the website after we are done with this session as well. So just give me 1 second. All right, can folks see my screen? Great. All right, so we will get started. So I think we're all here. So welcome formally to our CHAPA regional meeting for the Cape and Islands. My name is Dana Lewinter. I am the Director of Municipal Engagement here at CHAPA. We have a really full agenda for you guys today. And as I mentioned, we are recording this session and we will be sharing the slides and the recording after the call. So before we get started, I just want to give a quick overview of who CHAPA is for those of you who don't know us. Our mission is to encourage the production of preservation of housing that's affordable to low and moderate income families and to foster diverse and sustainable communities.
They always get sloppy. I didn't have lunch. I'm gonna make a pizza.
Just muting a couple of folks. Please keep yourself on mute while we're holding the session so that folks can hear. Thank you. And so we do this through a lot of different programs and policies and activities. So I encourage you to check out our website and learn more about what we do. I do want to thank our regional meeting sponsor, Bank of America. Without them, we would not be able to hold these sessions. They've been our sponsor of these meetings for a while. Normally we would be somewhere on the Cape holding this meeting, but what's nice about being able to do this virtually is we have a lot of folks from all over the Cape and Islands who are here today. And so we're excited to have all of you here with us. And I also want to thank our local participating co-hosts. So we have folks here and we're going to hear from them in just a minute from Community Development Partnership, from Housing Assistance Corporation, and from Housing Nantucket. It's really critical the work that they are doing on the Cape and Islands. We're excited to have them with us and to have their expertise. Before we go any further, I wanted to hand it off to my colleague, Whitney Demetrius. She's going to get us going with a poll survey. Reminder, there's no, there are right answers, but this is not a test. We're just trying to launch the conversation with something. So I'm going to hand it off to Whitney.
Thanks, Dana. So I'm going to launch the poll now, and hopefully you all can see that. It's just a few questions there if you can answer, and then we'll go over some of the answers and talk about it in terms of how it may inform our discussion. And if you're able to finish in time, please do use the chat to introduce yourself. Let us know who is here on the call as well in the chat. Thanks.
Okay, and as you guys are doing the poll, just a reminder, yes, there are too many of us to go around and say hello and who we are and where we're from. So if you could just share your name and either the organization or the community that you represent in the chat box, we will get a better sense of who's on the call and who's joining us. And you might see some familiar names and faces as well. And some thumbs up. Are folks able to see the poll? You're able to participate in it? Yeah, great. Okay, just making sure that we're all on the same page.
Awesome.
So why don't we give folks just one more minute to complete the poll? Great, I see a lot of folks in the chat telling us where they're from. Thank you all for doing that. All right, so why don't we go ahead and see what the poll results are, Whitney?
Awesome. So I have ended the poll now and have shared the poll results. Hopefully you all are able to see that. I'll look for some head nods or thumbs up that you can see it. But I'll go through those questions for those of us who are joining on the call as well. So who do we represent is the first question. So glad to see so many of you all from local municipalities as well as local community organizations. But we also have a good percentage from statewide organizations, local residents, consultants, and those who see themselves as other. And that may just mean because they are a confluence of those different roles. And so excited to have so many of you all on the call today. The second question is about, according to the American List, what percentage of American renter households were unable to make any housing payments in May 2020? And that actual answer was 22%. Actually 22%, and a few of you got that correct as well. The third question talks about, from the same report, AmericanList.com, what percentage of American homeowner households were unable to make any payments from the renter household. So that again also was 22%, and most of you all got that accurate as well. The fourth question is from the Federal Reserve Bank of Boston report, impacts of COVID-19 pandemic on New England homeowners and renters. The question was, how many New England households are at risk of missing their rent or mortgage payments due to coronavirus-related job loss? That actual answer was more than 1 million households. Really astounding numbers there, right? More than 1 million households. The following question is from that same report and ask about under the best case scenario, how much lost housing payments are likely to have accrued in New England from April and through July. And that answer was $1.42 billion. 1.42 billion. Really, again, astounding numbers. The following question is according to the MAPC update to the COVID-19 layoff housing gap report, which talks about what percentage of standard unemployment claims came from just these three occupations: food preparation and serving, office and administrative support, and sales. So just from those three occupations made up 40%. 40%. And many of you all got that correct. The last question is, have you ever been at one of our CHAPA regional meetings before? And where 36% of you have, and we'll welcome you back to this sort of forum. We're excited about the fact that 64% of you have not, and excited about, although we are unable to meet with you all in person, excited about the opportunity as well to meet with you all in virtual space and be able to have these conversations. So I'll hand it back over to Dana, and thank you again all who have shared in the chat. Happy to have all of you all here today.
Thank you, Whitney. So we're going to go back to this sharing my screen, so just bear with me. Thanks, everyone. All right, so we are going to walk you just through the agenda real quickly. So first, we're going to hear from our regional updates from our partner organizations. Then we're going to have a policy update from some of the folks on our CHAPA policy team. Whitney will join us again to talk about our municipal engagement initiative. And then we're going to do some regional sharing of some data and discussions with all of you. So please use the chat if you'd like to ask questions of the speakers, but we will have time on the agenda for you to speak as well. So let's move on to our regional updates from our partner organizations. So we're going to start first with Jay Coburn from CDP. So Jay, if you could unmute yourself, please go ahead.
Thank you, and Dana, and thanks so much to CHAPA for organizing this opportunity for us to all get together here on the Cape. I'm Jay Coburn, the Chief Executive Officer of the Community Development Partnership. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the CDP, we're the nonprofit community development corporation that serves the 8 Lower Cape towns on Cape Cod. And our mission is to lead the Lower Cape in building a diverse year-round community of people who can afford to live, work, and thrive here. And we do that by promoting and developing and managing affordable housing, nurturing the launch and growth of small businesses, and facilitating collaboration with businesses, nonprofits, and government agencies in the region. So we, of course, have, because of the COVID-19, both public health and economic crisis, have been very much engaged in a number of challenges and helping our community address those challenges, both on the small business front and in our work in housing. I'll just touch briefly on small business. We've been working to help small businesses evaluate and apply for the various federal and state loan and grant programs, as well as provide technical assistance in cash flow management and in reopening strategies to weather these challenging storms, particularly in a very tight seasonal economic environment that we have on the outer and lower Cape. Presents some interesting challenges compared to other parts of the state. On the housing front, so we have we either own or manage about 100 units of affordable and community housing. We've been in regular contact with wellness checks with our residents, as well as to work with our residents as they face financial challenges to ensure that they're getting connected with appropriate programs that can help them with that. And I'm pleased to report that we're at in excess of 90% in our rental collections, with about 65% of our rental income coming directly from the residents and not through housing subsidies. Fortunately, we have a great partnership with the Homeless Prevention Council, who provides case management services for our residents. And so for those who have had difficulty applying for unemployment or getting access to the RAF program, or using other support programs such as getting on fuel assistance or getting a lower mass health premium or applying for SNAP benefits, the whole host of different ways that we can help families manage this storm. The Homeless Prevention Council has really been helping us do that. For the last several years, we've been working on a project called the Community Housing Partnership, and I see many familiar faces on the screen of those of you who have participated in our Municipal Housing Institute and our quarterly peer group meetings and advanced trainings as part of that initiative here on the Lower Cape. So we switched from, rather than having a quarterly peer group meeting, to starting to meet on a monthly basis using the Zoom platform. And that's been very successful in helping to update folks in the municipalities who are working on housing issues to respond to the crisis, as well as to try to keep us moving forward with the development pipeline that is so important to addressing the challenges that we face here on the Lower Cape. Several of the towns in the Lower Cape also expressed an interest in how might municipalities use community preservation and housing trust funds to help fill some of the gaps in rental assistance. And so under the leadership of our Director of Housing Advocacy, Andrea Aldana, we convened a working group to try to move forward with creating a regional effort. And that work has started to wrap up, and we have a lot of consensus on the towns each are moving forward on adopting emergency rental assistance programs and having a consistent set of guidelines and targets. And one of the reasons that we kind of moved carefully and a little bit slowly is out of the recognition that the federal unemployment benefits were helping, and other benefit programs were helping many families with the immediate term, but particularly for families above 50% of area median income, we were likely to see a lot of challenges going forward come August and September. And so I think we're feeling pretty confident that there is going to be additional resources through CPC and Housing Trust dollars for this higher for higher income families in the low to moderate income spectrum to be able to get some relief through these emergency rental programs. So that's what we've been working on here at the Community Development Partnership, and excited to hear from my other colleagues and from folks at CHAPA.
Thank you, Jay, so much for all the work that you guys are doing and for sharing that with us here today. So we're going to go to Elisa Mignata. She is from the Housing Assistance Corporation. So Elisa, if you could unmute yourself and we can hear from you.
Hi, thank you for having us. It's nice to see so many familiar faces here. I'm hoping that we'll have a good, productive conversation later in the agenda. We all know that we have a housing shortage on Cape Cod, right, and an affordability gap. We knew that before we had the pandemic, and it's just been amplified, the need to be able to help our workforce and our families and our residents be able to stay at home. Right, the pandemic really demonstrated the link between healthcare and housing, between housing and a robust economy, and the need to have that safe, affordable housing for people. We found really quickly that it's a luxury to be able to work at home and stay at home and be able to wash your hands. And for many, many of us in the region and throughout the state and the nation, right, that luxury is at risk. And no fault of their own in most cases. So our agency has been working to bring the resources to bear to keep people safely able to afford living at home in the housing that they currently have. So the way I like to talk about Housing Assistance Corporation is we're kind of the one stop for all things housing in the region. We have several of the regional contracts for Section 8. We're a housing developer, and we buy, sell, and build housing. But we're also the administrator for the HCEC funds, which means that we're the one-stop calling location where people call us for help and access into other resources. So that means that we administer the RAFT, the IRMA funding, and we do online education for our clients as well, and some case management. But the other thing that we did is we started what's called a Workforce Housing Relief Fund, because we knew that this was not going to be going away fast, right? That the crisis that we were experiencing at the magnitude that we needed to start amassing the resources quickly. So along with the funds that we administer both federally and for the state agencies, we also have partners with foundations and donors. We've raised over $700,000 in funds that we're able to administer for rental assistance. The town of Yarmouth and the town of Barnstable have stepped up generously, and we're working with other towns through the region to be able to be that rental assistance provider. It's a very detailed process going through the applications of it's not just money in, money out, or application in and application out. It's a very lengthy process to income qualify, to work with the landlord, to coordinate the need, and then to distribute the funds. So we've been able to use our administrative wherewithal and capacity to be able to administer funds for other towns and for our donors. So what we have seen, though, is that calls for rental assistance have gone up over 400% since last year. Foreclosure, people calling for foreclosure prevention is up over 300%. And again, as Jay said, I don't think we've hit the crisis point yet. We know that we'll have a second and third wave of this coming when the federal subsidy ends, when the state unemployment ends. And the third factor for our region is the seasonality of our employment, right? So many of the people who thought that they could go to work this summer and work their 2 or 3 jobs are realizing that's not going to pan out. A lot of places aren't opening. A lot of places have limited hours. So we feel like pretty quickly we're going to be in a situation where we're going to have a larger group of people who are needing help and needing assistance. The other thing that we're seeing is childcare. Childcare costs are, when you can find childcare, it's 3 times as much as they're used to paying. So the costs are off the chart for families. Many have lost their food subsidy, and a lot of people are having to self-pay their health insurance. So there's like a double and triple whammy that's happening for people. Even though they might have the federal subsidy, there are some real economic issues that families are facing that are gonna only get worse and only play out for not in a good way for them. So we're hoping that we can stay ahead of the curve, keep amassing the money needed for rental assistance. And it's with partners like CHAPA. You guys have been so good on the state level of advocating for us to be able to get the money and make the case. So we appreciate it, because it really is, all of us are in this together to anticipate the needs and then make sure that they get to the right people and right organizations to disseminate them. I think that's enough for now, but I'm happy to answer any questions. I wanted to give you kind of a big picture of what we do, but also give you some anecdotes on kind of what we're hearing with people calling in and what they're saying, the reason they can't afford. We hear this thing of, well, they're getting the federal subsidy, they're making more money, they don't want to go to work. The problem is there's no childcare, or they have to pay 3 times as much, right? They have to self-pay their health insurance. And the economics for the family just don't work out. So when that little bit of help goes away, we're gonna definitely have a bigger crisis on our hands.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate this, your comments and the work you're doing, and some of the numbers you shared are just sobering for the breadth of the impact. So thank you so much. So our last regional partner who we're going to hear from now is Ann. She's from Housing Nantucket. Ann, can you unmute yourself and share? Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Dina. My name is Ann Crispa. I'm the Executive Director of Housing Nantucket. First, just wanted to say thanks to really everybody that I'm seeing in the participant list, 76 participants, never mind who's watching live on Facebook. So I think it's amazing that so many people are showing up with that interest for affordable housing, because we're in such a special time where all of us who are advocating for affordable housing have been doing this for so many years, but we're all really impressed with the amount of interest that is really coming from the community, and we hope that this sustains. So thank you all for taking the time to join. Housing Nantucket, for those of you who don't know, we're a private 501c3 nonprofit. We were founded in 1994. Our mission is to create affordable housing solutions for Nantucket's low and moderate income residents. Our programs include an affordable rental program, which is 38 scattered site, reasonable rent, income qualified tenants, year-rounders around the island. We also administer a covenant program, which is a home ownership program, moderate income again. There are currently 91 covenant homes in these scattered sites around the island, and we're on track to meet our goal, which is 100 covenant homes by the end of the year. So the market's still hot here, regular market as well as covenants. So people are selling covenant homes, our purchasers are still qualifying with the banks, which is all very good news. We also we run an education program. So first-time homebuyer education. We're certified through CHAPA. So again, shout out to you all for helping us with that. And we're also going to be expanding our programs to do more financial counseling, because looking ahead, that does seem to be something that people are going to need. Challenges facing our region for the past 3 months. Well, internally at Housing Nantucket, of course, it was that switch to remote operations. So we're a 3-person staff. It was critical that we maintained a solid base for our tenants, especially. And so we all were working from home for a while. Right now we're back in the office, and we're seeing people through glass partitions, keeping our staff safe. Our staff's been amazing. But so things are back, but we feel like we're stronger than we were before. So that's all good stuff. The community at large, as I heard from my colleagues on the Cape, the inability for a lot of our constituents, because of their hourly workers or their families that don't have work right now, the seasonality, all of those are true on Nantucket as well. We work very hard during the summertime, and in the shoulder and winter seasons, it's using that emergency savings that was able to be earned over the summer to spread out over the course of the year. So we're all trying to prepare ourselves for what's ahead. So that's a big challenge for us. But we do have some success stories. And one of them, I just want to share a little data from our emergency rental assistance program. So we had one up and running. It's run through the Nantucket Interfaith Council, led by Janice Carrero, who I see is on this call. She really stepped up to the plate. Janice and her team served 224 households, that was just last quarter. And in normal years, that's as much as she would serve in 2.5 years, served in 3 months. So she really, it's just so amazing. Not only did Janice and her team step up, but her funders also stepped up. Funded mostly through private donations, through the Interfaith Council's own financial fundraising efforts, from the CPA funds, from the town, from our Community Foundation of Nantucket, and from a new entity called Act Save. So it was local residents trying to raise money to help their neighbors. So we're all really impressed with that. So other challenges, just trying to continue to stay safe with all of the influx of summer residents. And our census response, not so good. Right now we're at about 25%. And for anybody who is on Nantucket, of course, we know we need to keep continuing to get that word out there so we can get the federal funding and representation that we need on the island. So there's been a couple of silver linings that I just wanted to mention. This switch to Zoom meetings, this is my first CHAPA regional meeting, and it's really opened up a new world to us, being able to participate through Zoom in all these regional meetings and through it with our partner, CHAPA, as well as MACDC, and just learn so much and share best practices and get to know all of you. It's been huge for us, and I love that now all of us from Nantucket can actually come in and learn and get our input in there without leaving the comfort of our own guest rooms. So that's all good stuff. The other thing that's been a silver lining that I wasn't really expecting, but I'm thrilled about, is the renewed interest in promoting racial justice. So this is something that relates to housing, as we all know, because the inequities that are in our systems a lot of times are displayed through housing, and specifically the lack of affordable housing. So we're able to, Housing Nantucket was able to now partner with these organizations that ordinarily you wouldn't really see any kind of like merging of interests. But we're really thrilled to be working now with the Nantucket Historical Association and the Nantucket Preservation Trust and the Museum of African American History through their African Meeting House on Nantucket. And we're all working together to look at how in history Black homeownership has actually played a key role in our history. But maybe that wasn't highlighted as much as it could have been. And so we're exploring that, trying to figure out how can we help inspire our residents of color to really to see themselves in a home, because sometimes that dream just isn't there. If it's because maybe homeownership wasn't really part of their own family, or perhaps, they don't feel part of the community, which is disturbing, but a reality. So just seeing more imagery of from the historical references and whatnot. We think that promoting those through exhibits and videos and any kind of audio recordings and maps, that's something that we're working towards, and we hope to have an exhibit at the African American Museum, the Meeting House, hopefully in the fall of 2021, to try to really extend the time that people are interested in this. This isn't just a flash in the pan, everybody's so excited about it, but it's something more of a longer term initiative. So we are thrilled about that. And lastly, I just want to mention another accomplishment from our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, which I saw a couple members on this call as well. The trust fund was able to purchase a 1-acre parcel just last week in an area that is a mid-island area connected to transportation and other resources. Yes, round of applause for them. And they plan to develop that with up to 32 units, which is part of our Neighborhood First program, and it's a suitable for that neighborhood, suitable scale, and the funding's already been approved. So that was huge and a big accomplishment for our community. So thanks again for the opportunity to update you on all that.
Thank you so much, Anne. I really appreciate it. And before we move on to our next section, I just want to acknowledge that Philippe Jordy from the Martha's Vineyard Housing Trust is also on here, and we'd be excited to hear from him as we get into the discussion section about the work that's going on there as well. There's so much work going on in the Cape and Islands, and we really appreciate it. And I see some folks are starting to chat in the chat box. Please to share your experiences that way, and to add to the conversation that we're having. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again, and I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Abidnia Curvey from our policy team to give us an update, to start us off on an update and on the state level, and then we'll hear from Ryan Dominguez on our federal updates. So Abi?
Thanks, Dana. Hello, everyone. So glad to see you all here. I am Abidnia Kurve. I go by Abi. I'm the policy associate and work with the public policy team at CHAPA. And as COVID hit, we have had to sort of just recalculate our priorities and make sure that we are responding to the crisis and making sure the road to recovery makes sure there is enough affordable housing, and the policies that we are advocating for ensure equitable policies and housing programs that we are working for on the state level and also on the local and the federal level. And so our approach has been making sure that the housing stability during COVID crisis is ensured with equitable policies. Going forward, there's a lot that we have been working on in terms of the legislative side and the budget side, and there are a few things that I would like to highlight today, which have been our really priority focus. Going into the COVID crisis, we advocated for getting the eviction and foreclosure moratorium bill, to be more comprehensive, and that passed. We advocated for expansion of RAFT program, and I'll speak more about that. And right now, our focus has been not getting our focus away from the housing choice bill, which has come up in the form of provision in the economic development bill, which recently had a virtual hearing, and there was a lot of testimonies that were submitted. CHAPA advocated for that. The housing choice bill, it's still very much a priority, and it's still very much important because it reduces the need for certain zoning changes to have a vote from a supermajority to a simple majority, which would allow for many communities in Massachusetts, which right now have a big barrier in affordable housing developments to happen. And that also would go forward to building more housing and increasing our supply and opening up our communities to more households that can afford housing. And it's really great because with the whole conversation around racial equity, this bill has sort of found a more strengthening voice, and we have been able to have many conversations around that, and people are starting to make those connections. So we are definitely going forward with that. There is a huge wave of evictions that might be coming if the moratorium ends in middle of August, when it's as it's currently stands. Then there might be around 15,000 evictions that might be coming in, and it's going to be really important that we provide as many supports to avoid those evictions. And if it comes to those evictions, then there's a bill that has been filed which is providing legal representation for renters with low incomes and owner occupants in eviction cases. This is a smaller pilot program compared to a bigger bill that was filed before the COVID crisis, and I'll provide more links and with more information as we go forward. So these are some things we have been advocating for, along with more resources for renters and homeowners who are struggling to make housing payments in terms of RAFT, and there has been some good progress on that. At the same time, there's a lot of money that has already come in that is supposed to come in from the federal side, and we have been coordinating and trying to advocate with the administration on the right use of these resources, more than right use, effective use of these resources, like the Emergency Solutions Grant and Coronavirus Relief Fund, and I'll let Ryan talk about that more, but making sure that on a local level, on a state level, we know how these funds are being used and how we can leverage them to use for housing assistance and many more programs. And a lot of them have already gone into effect, and there's a lot more discussion we're going to have on that, but those were some of the priority things we were working on. Going on to the budget side, a lot has been going on in the budget. There's a lot of uncertainty around how budget is going to be filed for FY 2021. But some good things that have happened are the supplemental budget was filed, which appropriated a lot of resources for public housing authorities, permanent supportive housing. There was a 20 million appropriation for RAFT, which also increased the assistance for households, which was at 4,000 in a year to 10,000, and also the eligibility was up to 50%. It also increased resources for the housing consumer education centers, which are sort of the frontline agencies. And as some of our speakers pointed out, they have been bombarded with so many increased calls for this program, and it was really great to have that influx of resources. So the supplemental budget, as of now it stands, it has been both the Ways and Means, the House and the Senate have put their versions out, and the House now has to sort of just make sure that they go ahead with the Senate's version. So we are trying to advocate with the House to pass that forward so we can actually see those funds go out. The administration also announced an emergency rental and mortgage assistance program, IRMA, which is sort of like RAFT but goes up to 80% area median income. So it allows assistance for households with little higher incomes, which are also struggling, and allows some cash assistance for them. So these were some things that we sort of are happy to see. We were advocating for them for months, and we are also making sure that things like the Massachusetts Rental Voucher Program and the Alternative Housing Voucher Program, which are very essential, that they are not seeing funding cuts, that they are getting enough funding, because that's going to be really critical going forward, especially for households who are already facing economic hardships. And I would just like to sort of just take a step back and make sure that this time we understand that this time has really shown that housing like healthcare and housing are really interconnected, and this has really helped us sort of take that conversation forward, and all our efforts have been trying to like just push that forward, push more resources in that sense, and that is what our efforts has been. A lot more, we are doing a lot more than this, but these are some things that we would really love to get more traction on, and make sure that households in Massachusetts have have a safe place to live, especially in these times. So with that, I'll pass it on to Ryan, and then we can go on further.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Abi, for the overview of the state level work that CHAPA has been doing. Again, I'm Ryan Dominguez. I'm the policy analyst for CHAPA, and I help to coordinate the federal side of our work. And through that, I work with the New England Housing Network, which is a broad coalition of affordable housing organizations in each of the New England states. And through my work with the New England Housing Network, we've been advocating down in DC for various housing and homelessness kind of investments, including those ones that were passed through the CARES Act, as well as the House's HEROES Act. And we'll continue to fight for those housing and homelessness resources in the next kind of stimulus package that I know that everybody has been hearing about. And I think now we're getting better news that the Republicans are going to come to the table towards the end of July to really start negotiating a next package. There's other avenues as well through an infrastructure package that was just passed through the House, as well as the FY21 budget appropriations for the next year. So we're going to try to make sure that we can get as many housing and homelessness resources from the federal level as we can. But with that said, we've been focusing a lot of our recent attention on some of the funding that has come in through the state. We've been focused on three main sources of funding from the federal government. The first is the Coronavirus Relief Fund, or CRF. The second is the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. And lastly, there's the Emergency Solutions Grants, or ESG. So I'll start off with a little bit of an overview. So for the Coronavirus Relief Fund, this was the largest pool of money that Massachusetts received from the CARES Act. They received around $2.7 billion from the federal government, and about 25%, or $502 million, went directly to cities and towns. And cities and towns had to apply for this funding. They had one recently, I think about a month ago, and then they'll have another funding round in the fall. So to give you all kind of a little bit of an overview of the cities and towns that received money directly, Barnstable received close to $4 million. Nantucket received around $1 million, and Oak Bluffs received around $400,000. So cities and towns and states across the country have used the Coronavirus Relief Fund for things like rental assistance, as well as a homeowner assistance fund, as well as funds to help developments, especially affordable housing developments, fill in any kind of financing gaps that they may be facing during this time. So those are all a great flexible kind of use of all of those coronavirus relief funds. To move on, the CDBG program is the next pool of money that the state of Massachusetts has received, and they've received around $86 million for CDBG, and around $40 million of this went directly to entitlement communities. Barnstable received around $170,000 for CDBG. And CDBG can be used for a number of different things, but during this time, we've seen it used for emergency rental assistance, such as IRMA, which has been created on the state level. It could also be used for funding housing counseling and those types of programs as well. And lastly, there's emergency solutions grants, which can be used for shelter costs as well as rapid rehousing. And in Massachusetts received around $104 million for ESG, and close to $60 million of this went directly to cities and towns. So before I kick it back to Abi to tell you a little bit about what you all can do as local advocates, I'll just say from the federal level, I think it's really important for us to now advocate in our local cities and towns for the funding that did come in from the CARES Act to actually go towards housing and homelessness. So I would really ask that you contact your local municipal officials and ask them to either have like a public process or public comment period, and for you to really call them and let them know that housing and homelessness resources are still needed across the state and in each of our communities. So with that, I'll kick it back to Abi, and I'll throw two documents in the chat now so that you can see where all the different funding went in terms of cities and towns. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. And before I move on, I just wanted to address a few things in the chat. So I don't think there is any 10% affordable housing provision, but in the current version. But I will post a testimony and some links around the Economic Development Bill. CHAPA has submitted a testimony to support the housing choice section in the bill, as well as add a few sections around state LIHTC and things like that. So more details on that. I just posted the link on that, so you can find more details there. Also, in terms of the eviction ban. So a lot of interesting things have been going around with the eviction ban, because there is already a case, 2 landlords have filed a case against the eviction moratorium, on the state's power of eviction moratorium on them. And so there is that. The governor has the ability to extend the eviction moratorium, and we are supporting a short-term extension on that moratorium. And at the same time, there are a few, Boston Housing Authority, wind companies have extended their eviction ban through the end of the year. So that is definitely a great thing. We are still sort of, discussing on like how, if there's a comprehensive policy and what can we do about it, but it's certainly great to see landlords and housing authorities doing that individually on their own. So that's certainly a great thing. In terms of what you can do now, as Ryan pointed out, there's a lot that you can do on the local level, because there's many funds that are there on the local level that you can access, and make sure that there is engagement on the community level for a more transparent distribution of those funds. And CHAPA has also sort of, I'll post a link where CHAPA has given out a template, which you can send to your community and municipal officials, asking them to have an engagement process for public input, so there can be some voice in terms of how those local federal funds can be distributed, and especially for housing. On the state level, you can advocate for housing choice and right to counsel bills. It would be great to also, thank the legislature and the administration on the draft funding. We are still trying to make sure that supplemental budget gets passed, so we see that money out of the door. And also, in terms of advocacy, CHAPA has a lot of committees that are focused on these discussions, where we sort of decide, how are we going to proceed and what policies we are going to proceed with. So you can join CHAPA committees which are focused on budget priorities, which is the Building Blocks Coalition. We have the Housing Stability and the Economic Mobility Committee for Homelessness Prevention, the Public Housing Committee, and Rental Assistance Committee. And so it would be great to sort of, build this coalition and have the voices together, so we can advocate for these things and share priorities together. With that, I would be, I'll post some links, and I'm happy to answer any questions regarding state priorities.
Thank you, Abhi and Ryan. I really appreciate it. And yes, please share all of those links. And folks, a quick tip on Zoom: if you want to save all the links from a chat, you can just click the 3 dots at the bottom next to where it says file, and you can save the chat. But we're also have all of these materials will be posted on our website as well. So I'm going to hand it off. We're getting close to when we want to hear from you. I promise that's coming. Whitney Demetrius is going to speak very briefly about our municipal engagement initiative. So Whitney, go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, as Dana said, we want to spend the time really hearing from you. So I'll try to fly through this. And again, we're here as a resource to you if you want to know more about the program. So basically our goal is building support on the local level, specifically around affordable housing and housing production across the Commonwealth. We do this in several strategies locally, understanding that each community is unique. Our goal really is to support the efforts of each community, bolster and expand housing opportunities, as well as the number of people who are actually on the ground and doing the work. And so we know that many communities lack a strong pro-housing advocacy group, and our goal is really to do that in as many communities as possible, to sort of break those silos of what individuals like you all are really doing, but to make the voices stronger and louder and more impactful. So we know that there's different strategies in doing so, and so we put together an MEI Lite toolkit to sort of help you all get started if folks are interested in doing this sort of work on the local level. So you can check out our website to find a framework of agendas and who are your key stakeholders, thinking outside the box, how's the first meeting look, etc. And so we encourage you to check out our site to find out how to do that. And we're excited about potentially doing some future MEI coalition building work in the Cape. So look out for that. We're currently in 9 communities. Those are Arlington, Amherst, Medford, Newton, Essex, Foxborough, Lynn, Revere, and Acton, as well as 2 MEI-like communities, Agawam and Brookline. And again, each of those communities are different starting points, different forms of government, different size of government, different challenges. And so each of you all know your community best. Our job really is to set your table, the onus of it being your table, and really connecting neighbors. So excited to hear some of what has been shared about the neighbor-to-neighbor work that you all have been doing on the Cape. But really, that's really the goal, is to connect neighbors and doing this sort of work on the ground. And so again, we love for you to tell us where you live. Check out our website, and I'll share that link so you can tell us where you live, so we can connect you with neighbors who are activated in this moment, who want to do this sort of work, right? Thinking outside the box of interfaith folks and social services and school reps and bike and walk advocates, etc., to kind of really dive in, as well as Black Lives Matter movement members, etc., right, and activating them around this moment, specifically sort of mirroring some of what my colleagues have stated. So again, we're here to be a resource to you, and I'll hand it over to Dana, who will do sort of a data dive, giving some context regionally to kind of continue the conversation, because we really do want to hear from you. But again, do reach out to us if there are ways that we can help you start to get this work done.
Thank you, Whitney. I really appreciate you going through that. And yes, as Whitney said, we are always here to help in any way we can. So please don't hesitate to reach out to either of us. So very briefly, I just want to share some reports. I know many of you have probably seen these, but I think these are interesting for the conversation that we're having. We talked about at the beginning of the call, we talked at the beginning of the call, we did the poll, and I'm going to share a little bit more detail of some of the data that Whitney was digging into. So cities with frontline workers is what you're looking at here. This is from the Community Data Lab, the COVID Community Data Lab. It's been really interesting data to look at to see where COVID is having an impact. And you can see here that cities with more frontline workers have higher COVID rates. So just to kind of give you some sense here, Barnstable is one of the larger communities in your region, has a case rate of 82 per 10,000 residents as of June 3rd, and it has 46% of its residents are frontline workers. So that's something to keep in mind. There's also a correlation with residents of color, households in poverty, and overcrowding. So when you're thinking about where the impacts might be, this is a place to be watching. Whitney also shared, the folks who are unable to pay their rent, and it was 22%, I think, was the overall amount. But obviously not everyone is impacted equally in this moment. And so you can see here that low-income households are much more likely to have been unable to make their full housing payments, either making a partial payment or no payment at all. And again, just to keep that in mind, just because we're seeing significant payment of rent doesn't mean that there aren't folks, especially lower income folks, who are falling through those gaps. And lastly, from this data lab, the looking forward, which is what I'm most concerned about right now, and several of our regional speakers spoke to this, that less than half of surveyed renters and homeowners believe that they could afford their current housing costs for the next 3 months. So this crisis that's coming after the crisis, I think we all need to be keeping our eyes on that. There's another report that is from MAPC. This is their Layoff Housing Gap Report, and it just shows again that even with the significant resources that we've gotten from the CARES Act and other resources, there is just a gap. And so with the expanded CARES Act unemployment benefits, there's 7,800 renter households and 7,700 owner households who would have trouble paying for their basic needs. That's a $13.8 million monthly gap that we're looking at, which is daunting. And if these folks are still unable to work in August after those benefits end, the problem becomes even bigger. There's a statewide assistance gap of 195 million monthly by their estimate. They do now have MAPC data broken down by community. If you go to their website, you can take a look for your community. So again, just using Barnstable as our example, there's a need for over 1 million in housing assistance in Barnstable because there's 4,625 unemployment claims and 982 households estimated who need assistance. So just keep that in mind and definitely check out that resource to see the kind of need in your own community. We have good news, which is that we do have a lot of communities responding with emergency rental assistance. We did a survey with DHCD and MHP back in May to see where these local emergency rental assistance programs are popping up. I should make there's a map here that shows that, and we will also share a link to the full report, which has a lot of good information on how programs are operating. But I should make a note here that it is not true that Nantucket is considering an ERA program. It's that they actually have passed an ERA program and have expended already, I believe, over $400,000 in assistance. So we will be making that update. And if you have any additional updates to this data, it's only as good as the data that we're given. So we will make sure to update these maps monthly. A couple of recent reports that have come out, which many of you may have seen, there's been good coverage of them, but just again, this is from a report that was showing housing voucher discrimination. The Boston Foundation did a session on it last week, essentially showing that both voucher holders are often not treated the way that non-voucher holders are, and that Black potential renters are shown discrimination in many cases versus their white counterparts. And this is just showing a couple of the data points that white voucher holders and Black voucher holders are shown units much less frequently than their non-voucher counterparts, and Black non-voucher holders are not shown units at anywhere near the rate that their white counterparts are. And then also being offered financial incentives. There's a discrimination disparity there for voucher holders and non-voucher holders and Black versus white renters. So this is, I think, not new to any of us, but sobering information to keep in mind. So I do want to just raise up some of the things that we've been hearing from the Cape and Islands in our conversations as I open it up to conversation here. Certainly what's going on with emergency rental assistance programs, both those that are provided locally and statewide, but what's going to happen after the moratorium is lifted and kind of the crisis after the crisis that we're all facing. Certainly the impacts of decreased and reduced seasonal work and how that's going to impact people's ability to afford their housing over the course of the full year, not just right now. There's the potential for people to kind of reconsider where they live, and will that have an impact on the real estate market on the Cape and Islands and second home market? And as many have noted, we had a housing shortage prior to this crisis. So what's the impact going to be now when we weren't able to meet all of our needs initially? We've heard some impacts about town meeting not being able to meet. Are there initiatives that aren't able to move forward? Are there things that you would like to see happening in your community, but you can't get it on the town meeting warrant because you're having shortened town meetings or focusing just on budgets? Certainly the needs of undocumented immigrants. We know that undocumented immigrants are more likely to be at risk of eviction and housing instability, and even if they are eligible for emergency rental assistance programs, often there's a fear of what it may mean if they are seeking out state or federal resources, and so making sure that those folks are connected with and protected. The point has been made over and over about housing as healthcare, and also the moment that we're in and the movement that we're in for racial equity. And so I just want to raise all of those. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can start to hear from all of you. So to do that, I think what we'll do is just ask folks to please use the raise hand function, and we'll call on you. We've got about half an hour, but just want to hear from you. What are you grappling with? What are the things that you're seeing? What are questions you might have for our speakers or others on the call? So I will open it up to folks. I've seen a couple of things in the chat. If folks want to raise their hand and ask those questions to the group as well, I'm excited to hear from all of you. So let's see if we have any hands raised. can't see any. There is a function where you can raise your hand virtually, or you can just do it like this. If you raise it virtually, it'll be easier for me to see because I cannot see everyone's faces. So why don't we, let's see. I'm looking, folks are being quiet. If any of the speakers want to say anything more about the experience that you're having on the Cape, or I can start looking in the chat. I see that there are folks, there was a question here about whether CHAPA will be advocating for the home rule petitions to establish a transfer fee. I don't know if Abi, if you can speak to that at all to answer that question.
Yeah, so we are largely supportive of the transfer fee, but we haven't yet formally signed on to a specific language in that sense. But we are on a broader level supportive of that, but we haven't yet vetted the language of each and every proposal. So technically no, but theoretically yes.
Thanks, Abi. Elisa, go ahead.
I would love to hear from Philippe. I hate to put you on the spot, Philippe, but I saw that you were on the call and what's going on over there on the vineyard.
Yes, I would too, if you're able to unmute yourself and share.
Sure. So we've got a lot going on. We're selling 8 homes this month, and we're in the process of renovating an existing inn that will become 7 very small apartments by the end of the summer, and that's currently being offered. We were successful in securing DHCD funding for that, and we're matching that with some mass housing funding. So we're interested in seeing where development funds are going to be in the coming 6, 8, 12 months. We've also made an application for our largest project to date, a 20-unit rental project through the SHI program. So we're doing all this at the same time as trying to really understand and get a better sense as far as how we can work with smaller local general contractors and minority-owned contractors. Unlike Boston, we really don't have certified general contractors. They're working in the private sector and they're really not interested or have thought about working with public funding. So there's really not that certification that you would see in urban areas. But we're interested in seeing how we can build that. And so we're putting a real emphasis on that as we're gearing up to do more work. And we're looking at modular and seeing how that can potentially add value. We haven't really seen dramatic pricing benefits in the past. And we've actually found that our smaller contractors and general contractors in general are stick builders, and that's what they give us pricing on. So to move to modular is challenging, and we're learning more about high performance modular construction with some of the folks in the region. So it's not a foregone conclusion, but we're interested in seeing how that possibly may be a benefit to what we're doing going forward. We've done quite a bit of partnering with our local hospital, the Martha's Vineyard Hospital, created 6 or 15 units of housing for them last year. We've done a master lease and have worked successfully with them. They're looking to do 60 units of employee housing. I don't think we'll be working with them on that, but it was a good partnership, and we've since worked with our first homeless provider, supportive housing on the island, another nonprofit, fledgling nonprofit that we were able to do the real estate end of the deal, using some of our social impact investing funding to bridge loan CPA funding. And now we're working with the Island Autism Group on a project that will provide a home for them, farmland, as well as residential housing. So this is very new to us, and we're going to be looking actually to the Cape and other areas in terms of examples of how they did it and how they got it funded. So that's what we're working on. We've got a lot going on. I think what we're seeing is that a lot of people are going to be moving here that have second homes. The market is very hot, and it's going to create greater pressure on year-round housing. So it's going to be very interesting, 8 to 12 months just in terms of, as everyone has mentioned, the impacts on our year-round workforce. I think that's it.
Thank you so much, Philippe. I appreciate it. And I think your points, well, many of your points are well taken. And this idea, I wanted to jump onto something that you were talking about on the impact on the market. And there was some stuff going on in the chat about people saying that some weekly rentals are moving into year-round rentals. Are other folks seeing that in their conversations? That in your communities that weekly rentals are moving to year-round, or vice versa, or other impacts that you're seeing on the year-round housing versus the summer housing? Anyone else want to speak to that in their communities?
Dana, if I could maybe just add some of that. I think we're seeing some of that on the lower and outer Cape, but I think it's really driven by what is the differential between potential rental income from a year-round rental versus having the housing up on Airbnb and doing short-term weekly rentals. And so as you move to the outer Cape, so for example in Provincetown, that differential between a year-round market rate and 120 days on Airbnb, still allowing the owner to use it in the off season, is about $18,000 a year. And so even with some lower rental traffic over this summer, we're not really seeing that on the outer Cape just because the difference is so great. And those short-term rentals, even in this environment, are really hot. And in fact, people are feeling much more comfortable about coming and staying for a week in an Airbnb than they would to stay in a hotel or a motel or a guest house. So we don't really see as much of that people converting from weekly rentals to a year-round rental. But we are too, I hear the real estate market is very, very hot, and that same dynamic that Philippe and others have just talked about, people either thinking about moving into their second home year-round, which quite frankly, that could be a healthy thing for our seasonal economy of having a house go from being used 2 to 3 months out of the year and having somebody living there year-round, contributing to the year-round economy, most likely bringing a significant income because of their ability to work remotely. Is not so bad, but I think this also does have the potential to continue to just exacerbate the loss of year-round housing owned by year-round residents to seasonal rental, or that housing is converted to people whose income is not derived here in our local economy.
Yep, and I do also in the chat, there was some conversation about, I think Jay, you brought this up about whether folks are seeing arguments against affordable housing as a result of concerns around density. Do you want to speak to that a little bit more while you've got the floor?
Sure. So there's currently, and I believe the developer of that project, Ted Malone from Community Housing Resource, is on the call today. There's currently a 39-unit project in Truro that is before the zoning board under 40B. Those public hearings actually started back in November, and of course have been slowed down because of the challenges of working remotely. But over the last couple of weeks, a group, and it's from my observations, it's kind of the same group of folks who have pretty much found all kinds of other reasons to oppose affordable housing, but are raising the specter of, if you had an apartment building, wouldn't that put more people at greater risk for COVID-19? I think it's kind of ironic given that one of the highest density sources of naturally occurring affordable housing in Truro right now is a motel that people are now renting on a units on a monthly basis, as opposed to an apartment building that would be well ventilated, would have an elevator and 2 stair entrances. But I'm just wondering if other people are seeing this as a reason to oppose affordable housing on other projects on the Cape and Islands.
I'll just add to, I'd love to hear from others on the Cape and Islands, but this is an argument that we've been hearing throughout the state, and I will make just a couple of comments on it. One is, when we looked at the, one of the pieces of data that I showed you was about the correlation between COVID and overcrowding, and there's a difference between overcrowding and density, right? Density is the number of people who are adequately housed. Overcrowding is when people are too crowded in their homes to not be able to space, and that's kind of what you're speaking to there, Jay, about where people are housed now versus where they are. And in fact, we've seen where places that have higher density, like Somerville and Cambridge, have not had high rates of COVID, but places that have high rates of overcrowding have had higher rates. So the correlation is not necessarily clear that it's density; it's actually overcrowding. The other argument that we've been hearing is that when people are adequately and safely and affordably housed without crowding, whatever the density level is, they are more protected from COVID. And so we have affordable housing providers who have been able to show that the residents of their homes have really had almost no infection from COVID-19 because they've been able to safely stay in their homes. As we are all recommended to be able to do right now, to shelter in our homes and stay at home as much as possible. But I'd love to hear from others if they're hearing that in their communities as well.
Dana, can I speak for a minute? Dan Fortier, Town of Dennis. If you look at what's behind me, it's about the same density as what Jay is talking about, 63 units on 7 acres of land. It is seasonal. It had almost no opposition, but if you had this kind of a project for a year-round affordable unit, we'd probably hear exactly what Jay's hearing. The flip side is that given the people here are in the seasonal units behind me are basically coming from New York, Florida, Texas, Arizona, they are probably going to be the ones bringing COVID to the Cape. So, it's a challenge. It's just very difficult for people to understand. There's much more to it than just the density as to the disease that's being spread here. Relative to what we're seeing here, at least in Dennis, we have had banks start reaching out to us about pending foreclosures. Want to know if we have foreclosure registry or anything of that type. We don't. They are already, because of the demand I'm seeing on the other side, it is a seller's market, and the seller's market is second homes. And so I do see us losing, just like we did in the recession in 2008, we are going to lose year-round housing to money from those southern areas where people are looking to give themselves a getaway or an escape. We have had some Craigslist listings showing people going to year-round rentals of units that were previously seasonal rentals, but we also are seeing rentals that were weekly rentals in the past that are now being held for 3 months at a time, and not really changing the cost structure that much. My fear is that as we hit the evictions and people move into the wintertime, and the vaccine comes around, are we actually going to be seeing more units become weekly rentals? And once we begin to recover. Right now, it's onerous to do the cleaning that's required of a weekly rental. 7-week weekly rental now is 5 days. They're losing a couple days worth of rent because of the cleaning and the amount of time they have to leave the unit vacant between residents. And that's made Airbnb a little less attractive this year. But if there's a vaccine and things settle down next summer or 2 summers from now, I honestly fear that the evictions are going to make it a lot easier for people to just put them on for the summer, collect their $1,200 to $2,000 a week for 10 to 12 weeks, and leave it vacant for the rest of the year. At least that's what I'm seeing.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate you sharing. Other folks want to share? I know that Elisa, did you have another item you wanted to raise?
Yeah, one thing that's happening in our region right now, the commission, the Cape Cod Commission, commissioners are going to be voting on our regional policy plan. And this is a document that trickles down to towns and sets the policy for the housing, economy, and the environment. And it's supposed to be a balanced document that takes into consideration all of those three factors. And it went to the commissioners for a vote. And then there was a people's petition that came in that wanted to make it stricter on the environmental concerns. And so it went out of the process of making sure that it takes it out of the process of making sure that it's a balanced plan incorporating all the needs of the region. And so right now we have an opportunity to weigh in and send our testament to the commissioners and ask them to hit pause on taking those recommendations, the people's petition whole cloth, and hit pause, reconvene a group to look at the issues that they raise. Some of them very good and need to be considered, but not just solely, right, within context of everything. So one of the issues that's on their docket is for net zero construction. And net zero construction on face value sounds like, a lot of people don't know what it is. But what it does is it increases development costs by at least 25%. And if we were to start looking at having to increase development costs by 25%, we're gonna make our region even more unaffordable. And when we talk about zoning and single family zoning, that already constricts the land that's available to build, this will constrict it even more and drive up the cost of housing, so that we'll be even richer and even whiter and even less accessible to anybody else. So it fits in for people who are housing advocates to at least hit pause and ask them to look at creating a climate action plan and incorporating that into the regional policy plan along with everything else. So I'd be happy to send people wording. We have to get the letters in this week. The commissioners are meeting, I think, on the 21st or the 23rd. I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's one of those things that's kind of like a boring policy issue that comes up, like zoning's kind of boring, but it will have trickle down and ramifications that will be very expensive and hard to undo in the future for us.
So Lisa, we have,
if you want to.
Yes, if you could share that, that would be great. We have a question in the chat about the source of that 25% extra cost. Is that life cycle cost or is it upfront? What is the
upfront development cost, not life cycle?
Okay. I have a comment here from Anne Greenbaum, who's saying, we're constantly learning more about how COVID-19 is being spread. So there's questions and concerns about people on the kind of those who are opposed, but also supporting the best possible development on the site. I don't know if Anne, if you wanted to speak or just wanted to let your comments in the chat speak for themselves. She's not unmuted, so I'll assume comment in the chat is enough. Okay, thank you, Anne. So folks can take a look at that. Other folks, anyone else want to raise their hand and speak to what you're experiencing? I know we raised a lot of things there about, housing is healthcare, and Elisa was just talking about single family zoning and, the community being more expensive and whiter if we don't make changes. Any experiences that you all are having in your communities around racial equity? I know Anne shared an interesting project that they're working on Nantucket. But any other challenges that you're all facing that you'd like to run by us or hear from others? Okay. I know that there also was in the chat, if folks have ideas for modular manufacturers and those who have been doing general contract work with modular, that would be helpful for Philippe to be able to do that kind of work. Great. So unless there's anything else, I'd love to hear from anyone else who wants to share their experience. Abi, go ahead.
Yeah, so just I am from Arlington, and one good thing I would love to share from Arlington is that we have been having with the Arlington there's a group Equitable Arlington which is already doing a lot of advocacy, but with the town government there have been conversations through Zoom in terms of housing and racial equity, and that has been really great because they have been making those connections of like asking people, why did you choose to be here? Is it because it was it was considered a better community because it was white? Why are the schools better, and what are the just trying to get conversation going around systemic racism and how that is impacting. And I think that was really great. That's a really great effort as they are trying to sort of put out more data on who participates in zoning decisions and what is the racial makeup of those participants and do they get an unequal voice in that. And I think those, like just having those conversations, putting out that data has been really great to even start, calling out some things in terms of character of the neighborhood and things like that. So I think that is just starting point. I mean, Zoom allows, or any sort of visual platform allows more participation, and I feel like that has been, a great start point, and maybe that is something that can be taken up by other communities as well.
Thanks for sharing that, Abhi. And I should note, I think maybe if you can share the link, I think there is a link to that conversation was recorded. I think it was a great session and folks might want to check it out. I know that other communities are starting to do similar conversations in their communities. Brookline has been having a series of forums on affordability and systemic racism and the connections to zoning and some of the things that have worked in other places. So all of that to say that if you want to start those conversations in your community, or if you want to continue those conversations, because I know many of you have been, there are some great models of how folks are doing that work. Great. So any others before we head out? So before we do leave, I do just want to, I'm going to share my screen one more time. So that I can just wrap up with a couple of items. So just bear with me while I do this. So I just want to thank you all for your time. Thank you once again to our regional co-sponsors and to Bank of America for sponsoring this regional meeting. I just want to encourage folks that if you do want to stay engaged in these conversations, we do have those CHAPA committees, as Abhi mentioned when she was speaking. You can find all of that information on our website to find out how to join. We are still having forums despite them being virtual. We've had a couple of webinars since we've gone into stay-at-home orders, and so you can view all of that on our website. We've had a forum on establishing an emergency rental assistance program. For those of you who are still considering establishing a program, you can check that out on our website. We've also done a forum on RAFT, which was really informative for people to make sure that people are getting to that assistance that is so critically needed right now. We will have more coming up, including our CHAPA dinner, which again will be virtual, but save the date for October 21st for an exciting event. And then lastly, there's some other things you can do. If you go to our website, you can sign up for our monthly housing briefs. It's a great way to stay on top of everything that we're doing out at CHAPA and throughout the state. And you can engage with us locally, as Whitney mentioned. If you tell us the community that you live in, often we know where people work in our network, but if you tell us the community that you live in, you can submit that on our website. We can help to connect you up with other folks who are doing this work in your community as well. And obviously you can become a CHAPA member if you go to our website as well. So with that, I think I will just check the chat and make sure there's no other comments, but I see that Jenna has been saving all of these materials, as well as Whitney. And like I said, if you go to our website, you can find all of these resources and more, and we will also share this recording on there as soon as it's available. So thank you all very much for your time and your work in your communities as well. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Dana.